Hello, everybody. So today's exciting. About a few hours ago, I released the new reading that I'm doing, the new report. Secretly, I quietly released it. So that's available now at the end of today. At the end of this session, I'll give you a little look at it. So, yay. That's great. That's 6 months of work. Finally comes out. Now, for today, what do we have? Today we have the deity, gender, and auspiciousness of the planets from Phaladipika, 2nd chapter, text 27. So these three topics. There's a fourth topic also, but we already covered it. Interesting topics, right? Especially the one about the deity, I think people are going to find fairly interesting since it's fairly unique to Vedic astrology. I mean, it's completely unique to Vedic astrology. And the other two are also quite interesting. So shall we? Shall we jump in? We shall. We have to start a little bit early sometimes to keep people on their toes. I can be early as well as late. All right. So here's the whole verse 27. Kshinen dvarka kujahi ketu ravija papas chavit. Kliva ketu buddharka ja shashitamat shukra striyonye nara. Rudrambha guhavishnu dhatri kamala kala yaja devata. Suryad Agni Jalagni Bhumi Kapayo Vaivatmaka Sur Graha. So you got 4 lines, 4 topics. The blue line is the topic about what planets are papa, which in Sanskrit means undesirable or inauspicious. That's one of the topics we'll cover today. The second line is the gender, Kliva, Striyo, or Nara. 3 genders. The third line are the deities, Rudra, Amba, Guha, Vishnu, etc. And the fourth line is Agni, Jala, Bhumi, Kapaya, and Vayu. Those are the elements for the planets. That line we already covered last week because it was relevant to the body and the senses topic that we were covering. So we won't cover that again. This week we'll just cover these 3. The blue line, the green line, and the yellow line. Okie dokie. Okie dokie. So first topic is the inauspicious planets. And here's that line again. It's Kshinen Dvarka Kujahi Ketu Ravija Papa Spapas Chavit. So what it means is this. Inauspicious is a thin moon, the sun, Mars, the nodes, and Saturn. So too is Mercury if with them. So I think the first thing to clarify before going into details is what the heck is inauspicious mean? So what are we talking about? Is it identical to malefic and benefic? It is not identical to malefic and benefic. Otherwise, he would use the words krura and somya, which are the ubiquitous words for benefic and malefic. This is not identical to benefic and malefic concept, but it's quite similar. What papa really means is undesirable, troublesome. So certain planets are inherently troublesome because of what they represent, which is stuff that people aren't intrinsically welcoming towards. Like Saturn, for example, represents decay. We're not programmed or brought up to welcome decay, old age. Mars represents anger. We're not really programmed to experience anger as a positive thing. So there's certain planets that are intrinsically papam, and they also tend to be krura or malefic. And then there's other planets that are conditionally papam, and then there's planets which are shubha, which are good, the opposite of papa, auspicious intrinsically. So if we put it on a graph, I'll show you that in a second, on a table. But let me just show you where the words are coming from. The color coding here, it's not just pretty. I mean, it's pretty in the Sanskrit, but it's kind of plaid in the English because it gets out of order. Papa means inauspicious. Thin moon, this is something which we should discuss too. Thin moon is this blue word, kshinendu. What does a thin moon mean? Does it mean a waning moon? Or does it mean a mostly dark moon? There's different opinions about this. The word kshina means that you lost a lot of weight. You became thin. So it's not, in my opinion, this is not talking about a waning moon. This is different from waning moon. This is dark moon. So dark moon commences after the 8th phase of the waning and up until the 8th phase of the waxing. The moon is considered thin. It's not fat. The moon is fat after it's half full. The moon is thin before it's half full. And of course, it's not as thin when it's almost half full as it is when it's totally empty. So bear that in mind. So what he's talking about is the darker the moon, the less auspicious it is. This is what he means with kshinendu. And the sun, he puts as an inauspicious planet. Why? Because the sun is very strict. The sun is demanding and strict and super clear. And we're not really, as living creatures, we're not really so programmed to be welcoming towards strictness. We like forgivingness. And as a result, the things that the sun represents feel a bit unwanted or papa, inauspicious, harsh, strict. So there's overlap between inauspicious and malefic, but they're not exactly identical because the moon is not a malefic planet, but it can be inauspicious if it's waned, if it's disappeared. The sun is a mildly malefic planet, and it's also mildly inauspicious. Mars, Kuja. Right? Oh, Arca, there's the blue word. Sun. Mars, Kuja, the child of Earth. Kuja is inauspicious, like I said. Anger. Then Ahi and Ketu means the nodes, the yellow word. They're not malefics either, believe it or not. They're not malefics. And I think Varaha Mihira, it might be Varaha Mihira, but the classification somebody gives in one of these classical texts for Krura and Somya, malefic and benefic, is genius. It has also like conditional, natural and natural. So it has natural benefics, natural malefics, and then borderline planets which are conditional. So just to throw that in here so you know that there's a slight difference. The absolute malefics, the absolute malefic planet is Mars, and the absolute benefic planet is Venus, the opposite. The runner-up malefic planet is Saturn. It's a little less intense than Mars. So it's runner-up in its harshness. And the opposite planet from Saturn is Jupiter, so that's the runner-up benefic planet. Very close to being as benefic as Venus, but a little bit less eager. And then mildly malefic is Sun, because it's strict. And mildly benefic is Mercury. Then down the middle column is the moon, which can go either way, depending on circumstances, and also the nodes. That's how the classics, at least one of the great authors, and this was my favorite version of benefic and malefic. Makes the most sense to me. That's how they define benefic and malefic. So you see inauspicious and auspicious is slightly different, but similar. So Ahiketu is the nodes. Ravija is Saturn, the child of the sun. So too is Mercury, Vit, the knower. So too is Cha, Vit, Mercury, Sapapa, if Mercury is with these papas, with these inauspicious planets. So to put it on the graph, or is this a graph or a chart? This is a chart, this is a table. There's an inauspicious column, a situational column, and an auspicious column. And this is how it breaks down. Moon and Mercury are situational. Now you may say, this is kind of not so fair. There's a lot of inauspicious planets. And it does kind of feel that way. But that's the way he described it. I would say Sun and nodes are not really that inauspicious. It's really mostly Mars and Saturn. In which case this starts to look a lot like benefic, malefic. So, any questions about this? This is a breakdown of what planets represent desirable things, undesirable things, and then situationally desirable or undesirable. Venus represents pleasure, happiness, enjoyment, love. That's always desirable, no matter who you are, no matter what your version of that is. Jupiter represents expansion, growth, success. That's always desired by everybody, no matter what. They may have different versions of what they want to be successful with, but Jupiter's always desired. Inauspicious is always the sun, somebody who's strict, somebody who's making you follow a rule. Mars, somebody that's competing with you, somebody that's antagonizing you. Saturn, somebody that's limiting you, holding you back, making you deal with boring things. And then Rahu and Ketu, somebody that's just incomprehensible, something that's incomprehensible to you, so foreign. Those are the inauspicious planets. You got a question? Is starved moon the same as depleted ego? I don't know. I think starving is a avasta. We'll hear about avastas quite soon in the next chapter. So we'll hold on to that, see what he says about avastas. Ahi means serpent, Diana. And so, yeah, so therefore Rahu is called Ahi very frequently, because Rahu is a Naga. Is Mars undesirable under all circumstances? Its nature is undesirable. Its nature is undesirable. It's not undesirable under all circumstances, but its nature is undesirable. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure somebody out there is thinking, like, for example, with the sun, strict. All right, I see that's like undesirable, but sometimes it's good to be strict, right? Under certain circumstances, Papa planets work really good. For example, we like to have Papa planets in the 3rd house, 6th house, 10th house, even 11th house. Because they work good in those areas of life. There's certain places where it's good to be competitive. There's certain places where it's good to be strict and harsh. There's certain places where it's good to be really pragmatic, like Saturn. So it's not always undesirable, but its nature is undesirable. Is there anything auspicious about the nodes? Yeah, of course. You can't change. The nodes are time. The nodes are time moving forward. So you can't, without nodes, nothing changes. Nodes represent the ability to change things. Yes, exaltation. Hey, Eddie, I haven't seen you in a long time. Is one of the benefit of situational planets to allow inauspicious planets more beneficial in situations? No, I think just situational things are things which can be If like Mercury represents playfulness and communication, well, that depends on your Sangha. If your Mercury is very affected by Sangha or association, if your Mercury is in Sangha of Dushkritis, then you become Dushkriti, then you become a bad person. If your Mercury is in the association or Sangha of Sukriti or Sadhus, then you become a Sadhu or Sukrita. So Mercury is situational. Mercury is the ability to interact with people, but is that good or bad? Everything is situational, but the planets that are called out as being situational are highly situational. What does it mean for a person who's born in a very dark moon or solar eclipse moon? Just stick with the theory right now, because you're going too advanced to like reading a chart. There's 150 million other things you have to consider. But the point that the moon is dark is an inauspicious factor in the whole equation. Because if the moon is dark, then it's the person, the mind is not shining. So it can be difficult. Basically, the basic fundamental interpretation is the dark moon is inauspicious because the emotions aren't well experienced. The emotions aren't well understood. The emotions aren't easily shown or shared. This is a basic textbook starter recipe. Spices on the shelf. Not spices in the food that you're eating, but spices on the shelf version of the astrology. All right. It's a fairly simple topic. Let's go to the next one. The genders. Kliva Ketu Buddharkaja Shashitamas Shukrastriyo Anyenara. Nice simple sentence. Ungendered planets are called Kliva. So this is the Sanskrit concept of gender. Sanskrit has 3 genders. Most languages have 2 genders, male or female. Sanskrit has 3 genders, and hence Sanskrit-speaking people don't actually have a bigendral framework in their mind. They have a trigendral framework in their mind at least, because of the way their language is constructed, and the mind uses language to think. So the concept is there's males, there's females, and then there's crossovers or something which is indistinct. That's called kliva, something which is indistinct or crossing. So you can call them transgendered or ungendered. Napumsa is another way of saying kliva. Kliva Ketu. Ketu, Buddha, and Arkaja. Ketu, Mercury, and Saturn are kliva. They don't have a gender. I can give you more details with this. Ketu is very, very literally ungendered. It's very asexual. Except if this Ketu sexuality will become sapiosexuality, if you know that term, where people are their sexual activity is very psychological or intellectual or spiritual. But in terms of physical sexuality, Ketu is 0. So Ketu is very celibate, very, very asexual. And in that way, it's kliva, ungendered. You'll see this also when you look at the deity that Ketu represents. Mercury is another type of kliva. It's not the same as Ketu, and Saturn is a third type that's not the same. Mercury is like a child who's too young to really have a strong gender, and Saturn is like a person who's too old to really have a strong gender. This is one way to differentiate them. So with Mercury, it's like they don't really care that much about gender because they haven't hit puberty yet. They're not really that different from each other. Saturn, their hormones are also gone because they're so old. But the difference in flavor between Mercury and Saturn, you can tell if you put it in this metaphor of young people, old people. The other way that they characterize as Kliva is Mercury is technically biologically male, but moves towards femininity. So much so that it becomes balanced in its masculinity and femininity. So actually, Mercury is moving towards gracefulness. Mercury is moving towards understanding, comprehension, intellect, speech, conversation, relationship. Mercury is male, so it has its clarity and its stability and everything, but it's moving towards femininity. Whereas Saturn is the opposite. It's actually technically female, but it's moving towards masculinity, which means that it's moving away from softness, generosity, kindness, love, understanding, also communication and interaction. It's becoming more alienated, lonely. It's becoming more strict and harsh. So this is the variations in the 3 ungendered planets. Then he mentions the striyas, the females. Striya means female, and you get 3 planets there as well. Shashi, the moon. Tama, Rahu, means the darkness. And Shukra, Venus, the bright one. So this also is interesting, that Rahu is a female. So you're going to find also with male, there's going to be one that's pure. There's a mature, and then there's an unusual type for male and female. Let me just go ahead. Let me go ahead and I'll explain that in a second. I'll just finish the translation. Then the remaining 2 words in the statement say Anya Nara, which means the male are the rest. Anya means the others, and Nara means male in this context. So ungendered planets are Ketu, Mercury, and Saturn. Female planets are Moon, Rahu, and Venus, and the rest of the planets are male, Sun, Mars, and Jupiter. So this is I put it on the table in the way that, in the order that he mentioned it, that the author mentioned it. But for male and female, even for ungendered, maybe let's take ungendered out of the equation, just male and female. There's 3 planets in each. One is like pure gender. So Mars is pure male. It's not mixed with anything. It's just pure unbridled male. And then Venus is pure female. Nothing else, just female. Then below them, you have the sun on the male side and the moon on the female side. They're still very highly male and female, or very typically male and female, but it's like they have matured. It's not like they're just newly exploring their identity. They've understood their identity, so it's less volatile, or like this element of silliness is missing. Like pubescent people are silly. They do stupid things because they don't know what they're doing. They're very new at it. And similarly, there's an element of silliness both in Venus and Mars, which is like an extremism or like an over-the-topism. Unbridled, but you won't find that in Sun and Moon. Venus is just over the top, love, love, love. And Mars is over the top, compete, compete, compete. Sun is more calm. It's still very masculine, but it's more calm. It's grown up. Moon also is more calm. It's still very feminine and giving, but it doesn't want to just give to everybody. And then you have the third type in the male and the female is the atypical type. So that's Jupiter on the male side, and that's Rahu on the female side. So actually you have a full spectrum in the planets, a very full spectrum between hard left female and hard right male. A hard left female Venus, hard right male Saturn. Then if you move more middly, you get Sun on the male and Moon on the female. And then if you move even more to the middle, you get Rahu on the female side and Jupiter on the male side. And then if you come totally into the middle, you get these planets that are totally in borderland world. Ketu, Mercury, and Saturn, and each one's kind of spectrum out in a different direction. So it's quite a full picture. Why is Jupiter the atypical male? Because males typically don't use words. Males typically use force or tools. Jupiter uses words. Sun uses power. Mars uses weapons. Jupiter uses words. Words are female, Vak. And so Jupiter has intelligent qualities from the feminine aspect, but it's a male. And it's using them to set rules, because it's male. Rules, strict, enforce. But it's benefic male. So it's an atypical male. The other two male planets, Saturn and Mars, are malefic. Similarly, with the females, the female typically is not outgoing. So Rahu is the female wants attention and draws energy in. And this is why Rahu is like that. It's an eclipse point. It will swallow things. It will pull things in. But it's outgoing too. It's very demonstrative and exaggerative. So it's a female, but it's kind of like a very extroverted female, which is a masculine quality, to be confident and confident enough to just extrovert and show yourself. I've just noticed this over the years. You'll see a certain person, a certain type of woman who looks a certain way. It depends on like how old they are and what kind of fashions they grew up with, but it's not identical for every generation. But you'll see like a Rahu type, which is very demonstrative in their appearance. And whenever I have the opportunity to see the chart of the person, it always matches. Usually it's a Rahu-Venus conjunction or a prominent Rahu in a Venus sign somewhere. Okay, so those are the genders. Any questions about that? Oh. Okay, let's see what you guys are saying. Now, Kliva is not fluid. Kliva means emasculated, literally. Castrated. So that's literal as castrated or something like that. So it means neither a male nor a female. A bit of both. Because solar eclipses also result in the ambiguity of gender. Yeah, that's very interesting, because you'll have solar eclipse will be dark moon and the sun, and the sun will be either with Rahu, who's a very atypical female, so you have an atypical type, or with Ketu, who's a very ungendered type. How is dominant type of sexuality defined in a chart? Everything is very difficult. Everything is very difficult to actually read. Otherwise astrology would be easy. Everything is very, very difficult to read. However, your starting point with sexuality is your 8th house. And your secondary point is the 3rd house for that. You'll learn about these. You can learn about these things from my new house report, because this is the kind of calculations I have to work out. eighth house is the main focal point for sexuality. Third house is secondary, and then you'll see what planets are interacting with the eighth house and its lord, and also the third house and its lord. Do you have Cleveland? Do you have ungendered planets there? Do you have highly masculine planets there? What's going on? And then how does this sit in the background of the whole chart? You have to take a full picture because sexuality is so all-encompassing. Actually, it's not an isolated thing like bowling. It's something that's the root motivation of everybody's life in some form or another. So you have to take the whole context of the rising sign, the moon sign, the sun sign, and against that context, consider the conditions of the eighth house and how the genders of all those things are working together. Also, if you'll get people that are openly atypical in their sexuality, you can pretty surely guarantee that there's a lot of Rahu and Ketu involved in there, because otherwise you can't defy norms. Hermaphrodite is a type of... Hermaphrodite is Cleva. It's transgender. I'm saying that's Mercury and Saturn. A bit of Ketu. Postmenopausal female. That is Saturn. Very interesting. What else we have? Questions? If nodes are what allows change in the chart, is it sort of like our destiny is sealed via planetary placements without Rahu and Ketu? Like you can't change something if Rahu doesn't interact with it? You could. Why don't you experiment with that and see how well that theory works out? I just hope that you would have the tools to do the experimentation and know that there's more ways for things to interact with other things. You have to make sure that you first understand all the basics before you can carry out any kind of experiment well. So you would have to know about aspects, divisional charts, how things can conjoin each other in a division, in a subdivision, or how things could aspect each other before you can really determine that something is not with something else, not affected by something else. Can we interpret Rahu Ketu pole as a conflict between tendencies to be either completely asexual or sexually imbalanced? Yeah, you could do that. Does this literally mean if there are a lot of neutral... Do I have slow mode on? I should. Does this literally mean if there are a lot of neutral or unique planets in a birth chart, the person will be sexless or attract sexless partners? So we already talked about that, right? Oh, I'm sorry, Maria. I discontinued my freeform guidance just yesterday. I need a break and I need to catch up on the orders that I already have. No, there's nothing about nakshatras in that new chart because it's from Phaladipika, which doesn't. Is it possible to be God walking this earth? What did you think the earth is? You can't be God walking this earth. The earth is God. All right, next. Deities. Rudrambha Guha Vishnu Dhatri Kamala Kala Hyaja Devata. So now they're going to talk about the Devatas of the planets, which I find quite interesting. He says, Rudra, Amba, Guha, Vishnu, Dhatri, Kamala, Kala, Ahi, Aja are their deities. It's a very easy translation, isn't it? It's just all names. So it's just an order. Sun is Rudra, Moon is Amba, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that order. Mars is Guha, Mercury is Vishnu, etc. So it looks like this. Oh my gosh. All right, well, I'll go through it like this. Rudra is sun and moon. Rudra and Amba. Rudraamba. Rudra is the Purusha and Amba is the Prakriti. Or Rudra is called Shaktiman and Amba is Shakti. So that's the relationship between the sun and moon. This is why the sun and moon are representative of Rudra and Amba. Amba, AKAs for these people. Amba, Parvati, Sati, Durga, Kali. That's all different aspects of Amba. AKAs for Rudra, Shiva is the most popular one. But Shiva is calm. Shiva is Rudra in a calm state, not really exposing his power. So sun is exposing his power. So it's like Rudra. The Purusha or the Shaktiman is the possessor of power, and that's represented by the sun. The sun is the ultimate source of power. All the light of all the planets comes from the sun. And then the primary manifester of the sun's light, the planets manifest it to a tiny amount, but the primary manifester of the sun's light is the moon. The sun shines off the moon mostly. Besides shining itself, it shines off the moon mostly. And so that's what Shakti is. It's the manifestation of the power. The manifestation of power from the powerful is called the Shakti. So the moon represents the Shakti and the sun represents the Shaktiman, Rudra and Amba. Any question? You understand? We can go a little slower with this since this is mostly very new stuff to everybody. Not that everything isn't very new stuff. Okay. So you find sun is associated to Rudra, moon is associated to Durga, Amba, like that. What's next? Then you have this, the next deity here is called Guha. Guha literally means secret. So when the god who's named Guha means the birth was a secret. Or nobody knows how this guy was born. So there's this one god, Skanda, or Kartikeya, whose birth is very mysterious. Who's the father, who's the mother, it's unclear. It's ultimately related to Rudra, is the father, and Amba's the mother. But she didn't carry the pregnancy for various reasons. The Ganges River tried to carry it. Agni tried to carry it. And then they just put it in the earth. And then somehow this child was born out of the ground. So this birth of this being is Guha. Born out of the ground, Kuja, Bhoma, that's Mars. Born from the earth is the name for Mars. So Guha also, just like Mars was born out of the earth, born from Bhum. And what is his role? He was created to kill. Guha was created to kill. What's Mars? Mars is anger, competition, to defeat, the power to defeat, the power to kill is Mars. It's the most masculine planet. So why was he created to kill? Because the gods needed to kill this super powerful anti-god who was just wrecking them. They couldn't defeat him. So they managed to get create this guy, Guha or Skanda. So after that, he becomes the god of war. He knows how to kill. And that's the god of Mars. Any question about that? Thank you, Marie. Then the next planet in order is Mercury. Monday, Tuesday, a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday is Mars, Martes, and then Mercoledis, Mercury day. Mercury is, so the fourth god in the list, Vishnu. What does Vishnu mean? Vishnu means everywhere, omnipresent. Vishva? No. The thing which is the essence of everything that is Vishnu. So this is, Mercury is everywhere. It's spread out into everything. This is one reason. This is one way that Mercury is very representative of Vishnu. So usually Vishnu Bhaktas have some very prominent Mercury. Usually Rudra followers or Durga will have a prominent sun. Durga worshippers will have a prominent moon. Skanda worshippers will have a very prominent Mars. There's a couple of other things about Vishnu. What is the thing which is omnipresent? Vishnu means present everywhere. What is it? The thing which is present everywhere, which nothing can exist without, is perception or consciousness. And Mercury is Vit. Accurate perceptivity, cognition is Mercury, intellect. So in this way, also Mercury is very similar with Vishnu. And there's actually even another thing about Vishnu. Vishnu really likes words and really likes conversation and really likes company. Vishnu is not a solitary god like Rudra. Rudra is a solitary being. He goes and lives on a mountaintop with a couple of close confidants. Vishnu is a very social being. So similarly, like Mercury. Mercury likes community. Unity. Vishnu. Mercury is unifying. It's negotiative. It's diplomatic. It's tactful. It's unifying. Like Vishnu. Does that make sense? Yeah, this is good stuff, right? Next, what comes after Mercoledis? Jovedis, which is Jupiter. Thursday for the Norse words. I don't know how our English days of the week got half Latin and half Norse. Brahma, this is Dhatri. I don't know, I didn't write it in there. Dhatri means creator or establisher. Dhatri means the establisher. And Dhatri is a name for Brahma, and more commonly known as Brahma. And Brahma means the knower. Brahma is very similar to the concept, is very similar to the word Vishnu. Brahma means to understand, to comprehend, to perceive something. That's Brahma. Brahma is the one who perceives, the one who understands, the one who knows. Brahman is not Brahma. Brahma is a particular being with 4 heads who's a god. Brahman is the capacity for experience. It's not a particular being. So Brahma, the knower, is like Jupiter, not Brahman. Brahman is not Jupiter. Brahman is Ketu, as you'll find out. Brahma is Jupiter. Why? Brahma is actually the originator of the Veda. The Veda is, you can say, the origin of wisdom, but also the Veda is very importantly and more practically the origin of law. What's right, what's wrong, what are you allowed to do, when you're allowed to do it. That's all what the Veda specifies. And so the original law books, the original lawyer is Brahma. The original legislator is Brahma. That's Dhatri is the one who has established a principle. And that's what Jupiter does. Jupiter is very law-oriented, morality-oriented, religion-oriented, right and wrong-oriented. Also, there's other things about Brahma that are similar to Jupiter. Brahma likes to see things prosper. Brahma tries to grow the universe from 0 to 60, let's say. He likes to grow things up. Jupiter likes to do that too. His job is to take the universe from 0 and build it up to its fully manifest state. So there's like that. He has a Jupiter nature too. He likes to produce. He likes to see children being born. Brahma likes to produce children. Jupiter is like that also. Then after Thursday, you got Friday, which is Venerdis, Venus Day. Freya, I guess, in Nord. This is for Lakshmi. Venus represents Lakshmi, who's called Kamala. Kamala Harris, wow. Kamala. Kamala means she's the lotus goddess. It's because she springs from a lotus. She's called the lotus. But a more common name is Lakshmi. Laksha is the quality. So Lakshmi is the one who has quality. So in other words, Lakshmi means somebody who's desirable, something that's got quality to it. That's what the goddess is. She's the goddess of desirable things. So she's exactly like Venus. Venus is just like Lakshmi. Everything that Venus represents is what Lakshmi represents. Wealth, beauty, health, anything desirable, good, nice food, nice music, nice art. That's all Lakshmi. And hence it's Venus. And then after Venus, after Friday is Saturday. This one is Kala. Saturn is Kala. The deity for Saturn is Kala. Kala means fate. Kala is the name for Yama, aka Yamaraj. Yama basically is Pluto. Greek name of Yama is Pluto. Hades, maybe? Something like this. You know, those other kind of cultures, the same god in those other cultures. The god of death, the god of the underworld. Very like Saturn. So Saturn is associated to death, endings. Saturn is this highly about these things that are burdensome, responsibilities, things you don't want to do, but you have to do. And that's Yama. Yama is an enforcer of undesirable things. The limiter, a curber. He curbs. The sutra for Yamaraj's nakshatra is that he curbs things, reins things in. So he's just like Saturn. Saturn is very heavy, just like Yama. Heavy and strict and fearsome, but not in a fiery, fearsome way, in a dead way. It's deathy. And now, finally, you get the planet that doesn't have a day, because it's not really a planet. Ahi. Ahi, the divine serpent. It's like Ahi, Rahu. So the divine serpent is Seshanag. Rahu's deity is Seshanag. So if you want to go off on a tirade that there's nothing auspicious about Rahu, then you better be careful, because you're saying there's nothing auspicious about Seshanaga. Seshanaga is much more powerful than the sun. Seshanaga can swallow the sun. Seshanaga burns the sun. The sun burns everything. Sesh burns the sun. The Naga is basically a dragon. In Western terminology, it's a dragon. And so this dragon can breathe fire that's hotter than the sun. So Rahu is like Ahi, the divine serpent. Destructive, but changeable, changing things. Going to destroy things from one state and bring it to another. And then Ketu. Ketu's deity is called Aja. Aja means has not become manifest. Something which is ja is something which has been exposed or put out. So we call birth janma. When the baby comes out from the mother, it's called janma. Janma means to expel. So aja means it hasn't been put out. It hasn't come out. It hasn't been shown. It hasn't been expressed. It's just in a potential state. So what's aja? Aja is Brahman, which is the divinity which is unmanifest. The divinity which is unmanifest is merely the essential ingredient of reality, which is the capacity for perception, the capacity for experience. The capacity for experience is the capacity for reality. So the basis of everything that exists is this thing called aja or Brahman, which is the basis. It's not a thing in itself. Just like Ketu's gender is ungendered. It's just not gendered. Similarly, its deity is not a deity. It's not a specific being. And this is why Rahu and Ketu are both very, very difficult to understand, because they're very formless, especially Ketu. Very formless, very abstract, very intangible. So hence, you'll also see people, their spiritual inclination of a Ketu dominant person will be away from. They'll be antithetical to the idea that form is real. They'll think that formlessness is real, or what's more divine than form is formlessness. Something which is unmanifest is more sacred than something which is manifest. Something potential is more sacred than something kinetic. Something abstract is more real than something tangible when Ketu is dominant. That's it. Any questions about it? Let's check the chat window. The mind of moon seems to be a more accurate reflection of the sun than Mercury. So the mind seems to be a more accurate reflection of consciousness than intelligence. Is this correct? Accurate. It's not really more accurate, it's brighter. It's hard. The Mercury is much more accurate than the moon. Intelligence is much more accurate than emotions. But emotions are much closer to what consciousness is than thoughts. Thoughts are a highly processed form of consciousness. Emotions are more like raw consciousness, but still are not consciousness. Emotions are objects which are experienced by consciousness, but they're in a more raw thing. So the moon actually reflects more of the sun's light than Mercury does, for sure. But Mercury has a quality that it never strays from the sun. It always stays near the sun. So even though the moon has this distinction of being the sun's greatest representative, Mercury has the distinction of always being the closest to the sun. And similarly, it's the intellect, which is Mercury, and the mind, which is moon, which is most reflective of a being's true nature, which is consciousness. But it's emotions. The Phaladipika doesn't say anything about retrogression with that, Mr. Lutbert. What else do we got here? Let's see. Thank you, Marie. Brahma is so special that rumor has it that he is the link to, I don't know about that. Yes, but rumor has it. Yeah, I think probably. The Christian Abrahamic concept of God certainly seems to be kind of a mix of Indra and Brahma. Unless you get to Islam, where it gets kind of different and it becomes more towards Ketu. I don't remember. Bardo asked if we ever discussed colors. No, we haven't. Oh, we have. We did. It was in the basic thing about the planets. So you could look back and see that. Anything about colors in the original teachings? It's there. We already covered it a couple of weeks ago. Also, he's going to mention gems too. The thing about gems and planets is not bogus, but the concept that gems are used as a therapeutic is not classical. Gems are just associated to a planet. Why did Grahas get associated with deities? I'm explaining that whole thing. Why? It's like if you say Captain Kirk is the sun, Spock is Saturn, Dr. McCoy is, I don't know, Mercury, Uhura is Venus. How and why did Venus get associated to Uhura? Because Uhura has the same qualities as Venus, pretty much out of all these characters. And Captain Kirk has the most qualities of the sun out of all those characters. So similarly, when you're going to put the planets in the context of the gods, these are the gods that this author says are indicative of these planets. And this author's work has survived because this guy knew his stuff. What else? Any correlation of the seed of Shiva and Rahu Naga? No, the seed of Shiva is Guha. I don't know. Are you asking a different question? This Shiva's seed, semen, becomes Guha, but it didn't go into Amba, his wife. It fell on the ground. And then he was born from the ground. Alf is trying to interpret, but Alf interpretation is very difficult. It's difficult for me to do interpretation. And then supposedly I'm the expert. So really take it easy with your interpretation. Samurai says the day of the week when we were born, is that important to consider? Not at all. It's super important. This is a whole nother thing. Maybe one day I'll make a report for this. Before the explosion of what is honestly Hellenistic astrology in India, there were other systems. There's a nakshatra system, and there was a calendric system of astrology that was more widely used. After this technique became available of calculating the houses and the planets and the houses and the signs, after that became technically available by mathematics, then it became very, very popular. But before that, other systems were used. And the calendrical system is very important. The day of the week, the phase of the moon on that day, the nakshatra in which the moon was on that day, the half of the day, the hour, the lord of the hour, all that stuff is not a part of the kind of Hellenistic astrology, Indianized Hellenistic astrology that we now call Vedic astrology. But the old Vedic astrology had all those things in it. What day of the week were you born is very important because that planet becomes prominent for you. So I do have enough information about that I could actually probably make a report about it and get the ball rolling for people to think about it again. Maybe one day I'll do that. But for some reason, it's not that attractive to me. But it should be attractive to me because if you just look at like what month were you born in? What tithi was it? What day of the moon was it? It's all very, very easily, it's easy to see the value in it. Was the moon waning or waxing? It makes a huge difference. That's calendric astrology, I would call it. And yes, it's very important. S. Kumar wants to know, how can Venus be a female but a male? So this is complicated because people say, so far has the author of Phaladipika said that Venus is Shukracharya? No. He had the opportunity to say it right now in this topic about deities, and he didn't. He said Lakshmi. So that's important. Maybe you should check your sources. Who is actually saying? Is it some guy from Delhi? Or is it Montreshwar, a guy whose work has survived since the 14th century? Who is it that's saying this stuff? Secondly, what I want you to understand is that gender is about the relationship between two things. This is male, this is female. They fit together. That's why the female is called the female, and the male, if the female is not female, it's got nothing to fit. If it's just a male and then nothing to fit in, it's not male. Gender is about the relationship between things. So depending upon what you relate with, the gender might change. This is the alpha male phenomenon. So let's explore this phenomenon with dogs so that it's easier. You have a dog barking at you, he's barking at you, he's barking at you, he's acting so tough, and then a big dog comes along and the dog becomes so submissive. So this dog is acting very masculine towards you, which means aggressive and assertive. Because he's dominant. He's the only dog around. Then a bigger dog comes around, and then the relationship that this dog has to the situation now changes, and he starts to become feminine. He quiets down. He becomes more pensive and helpful. He tries to help the big dog. So the gender, the physical gender of the dog hasn't changed, but the actual operational gender and the psychology of the dog changes by the relationship. Now, if you're a deva and your body is not so imposed by your karma and you have more freedom to manifest your physical shape according to your wish, not according to what you're forced into, then you can actually even change your physical shape at will, not just from male to female, but from species to species. You can even become invisible and unmanifest. So for devas, or superhuman beings, their gender is not so rigidly locked. Even for humans, even for dogs, the gender is not rigidly locked. The psychological gender is always fluid and it's changing as you're in the different situations. When a woman is with a bunch of other women, she may feel very manly. She may take the lead in a certain blah, 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 and do the typically manly thing. But when she's surrounded by men, she might prefer to just kind of try to lay low. The same person. Or if you're with a bunch of assertive people, whether they're physically male or female, you might not want to compete with them. It might actually be irritating and annoying. But if you're with a bunch of receptive people, open people, then you might all of a sudden feel like, wow, I feel like I can express myself and expose my interior. So your actual operational gender for anybody, humans, even animals, changes per situation, although the physical gender doesn't, because of physical things for us are more slow in changing. But for gods, they can, not only does their operational gender change, they can manifest their physical gender can change too. So why would you have a problem that Venus in one context could be male and Venus in another context could be female? And practically speaking, the way that planets interact with each other makes them manifest a different gender than the way that they interact with houses and signs. When a planet interact, all the signs, and also for the signs, when the signs are interacting to each other, they have differentiation of male and female. But when they have interaction to the planets, they're all uniformly female. All the signs are uniformly female in relation to the planets, which are uniformly male in relation to the signs. But the planets in relation to each other have male and female spectrums, and the signs in relation to each other have male and female spectrums. So why should it be difficult to understand? You just have to understand that we're not talking about penis when you talk about male. It's not exactly the same thing. It's not that it's just defined like that, boom. It's not unrelated, but it's not exactly the same thing. Well, all right. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, Agni trying to carry the seed was almost extinguished, but still it's not Rahu. What is the link between deities, nakshatra gods, and planets? What's the link? It's like if you say Maga is Captain Kirk and Rohini is that yeoman whatever, and Kritika Spock. Are you going to get all confused and say, but I thought you said Spock was Saturn. Now you're saying Spock is Kritika? Just roll with it. I'm trying to teach you what Saturn is. And since you know Star Trek, I'm teaching you in terms of Star Trek. And since you might be working with Star Trek, I'm teaching you, I'm applying the principles to Star Trek. Similarly, when if the astrologers are telling us Kritika Agni, or let's think of one that has both. Rohini Brahma, Jupiter Brahma. Are you going to get all freaked out? Why get freaked out? Just learn. Brahma is showing the qualities. If you understand Brahma, you'll understand the qualities of Rohini, if you're careful, and you'll understand the qualities of Jupiter. Do you have to take the Phaladipika author's word as an axiom? You know, it would be a really, really good idea for you to do that, because the author of the Phaladipika really knows what he is talking about. But since you probably can't do that because you have an aversion to accepting authority, because authorities are jerks, legitimately, authorities, people who present themselves as authorities, are actually charlatans and cheaters, then you have a slower time learning, more difficult. If you can't identify who's a charlatan and who's genuine, then you won't be able to accept a guru. And then you won't be able to learn quickly. It'll take you all this time and self and doubt and all this stuff. But then that's what you'll have to go through. So if you're not going to accept Phaladipika as an axiom, then work with it and try to figure it out until you can see that it's true. Or move on if you can't. Why would you say divine is not gender polarized? I don't understand. All these planets are gods. Divine is not gender locked. What do you mean divine? Everything is divine. Rahu's day is Saturday, right? Kujavat Ketu, something like that, right? So Ketu and Rahu, they don't have a day. Why not? Because they're not planets. And they're not gods. They're nagas, they're anti-gods. But if you must perform some ritual for Ketu, then do it on Tuesday. And if you must perform a ritual for Rahu, then do it on Saturday. That's the axiom of the ancient seers, or medieval seers, or whoever it was that made the axiom. Nice, Alf. Last question. So with the balancing act of gender, could it be that Mars may be very masculine externally, but a feminine component internally? No. Why? Don't mix it up. People are trying to be so sophisticated, and then you just wind up tripping over yourself. The sophistication comes in how you'll combine everything. If you try to be sophisticated in your basic fundamentals, you're just going to wind up with gray and brown. It's going to be a mess. Mars is pure maleness. Venus is pure femininity. There's not a hint of femininity in Mars. And there's not a hint of masculinity in Venus. Accept it. Get a grip on that and deal with it. Is this ever true in anywhere in the real world? No. You can never just get Mars all by itself without any other influence. You can never get Venus all by itself without any other influence. But the way that you get that sophistication and spectrum is by putting Mars in different situations. Is Mars aspected by this planet or that planet? Is Mars in this sign or that sign? This house or that house? Etc., etc. That's how you get your sophistication, not by refusing to be clear-cut in your fundamental understanding of the planets. If you think that I have to be sophisticated, otherwise my astrology will be silly, so I can't accept this junk, like this planet is good and this planet is bad. This planet is benefic, this planet is malefic, this planet is male, this planet is female. All that kind of polar stuff is a thing of the thinking of the past. I'm a new age person, and I am not politically incorrect. And I'm not going to say that Mars is purely male. And I'm not going to say that Saturn is a malefic planet. Only old-fashioned fools say that. Well, good luck. Good luck mixing. It's like a cook who says, I'm not going to keep salt in my kitchen because salt it's too cut and dry. You never eat salt. Nobody eats salt. So I'm not going to keep it in my kitchen. Of course, nobody eats salt, but you put salt in the mixture of stuff with everything else that you cook. All right. So that's enough. That is enough of the ranting and raving. Let me show you something. Like yesterday, a couple of hours ago, actually, maybe 8 hours, I released something that I've worked on for 6 months. So this is a new report. It's a house-by-house report. Let me show you a bit of it. Look at that. What a beauty. This report's called The Houses of Life. And it's available at victorcara.com. Actually, right now. Just go to the readings thing. So I'll just show you a little bit, a couple of screens through it. It's the front page, right? Your basic chart and everything. That's my chart. Then you got a nice little introduction here. It sets, gives you some direction. Here's the contents basically of the report. It's got the house scores and the meanings of the houses, and then it's got the houses going. Then the second section of the report goes into detail. The report itself is usually around 70 pages. The second section of the report goes into the houses and the subtopics of the houses. And it separately analyzes the subtopics individually from the house. And then the third section of the report just takes the subtopics out of the context of the house and lines them up on their own. And then you got, at the end, an appendix with all the technical details. I'll probably start doing a series of videos on the technical details so people get some kind of an understanding of the astrology that's involved in generating a report like this, and how to do it and what the basic principles are. Even just knowing the basic principles will help you do your own astrological thinking. So that's the table of contents for the report. Then it starts the section on the overview of the houses. It works like this. You see, I get some. Each house is identified by its number, and then the scores represented in these bars. And I have this system of doing objective and subjective scores. So the objective means like this is the score for the house, but subjective means relative to the rest of your scores. So like my houses, I score like this. So you can see, for example, like 11 and 4. They have small red bars that go really far to the left. But their score, the main score is still on the right in the green area. So why is this small red bar going all the way to the left? Because subjectively, compared to the rest of my houses, this is how they scale to the rest of the houses. So those little tiny bars help you see, how does this feel to you? Relative to your life, how easy is this house, or how difficult is this house? Not relative to the world, but relative to you. So I worked out the engine for how to do that. You can see some smaller stuff. Each house, it's got its topics just mentioned. This is what it deals with. So that's the intro to it. Then I do this, show you the outstanding houses. In my case, it's 1 and 8, 4 and 11. Because really, it doesn't matter if the house is extremely positive or extremely negative. Being extreme on either end makes it a very important house for you. It makes you deal with it a lot. When it's outstandingly negative house and you deal with it a lot and trying to improve it or kind of wishing that it was different, or trying to figure it out. And when it's an outstandingly green house, it's something that is like your asset and you're constantly able to use it. So I have a page there which just puts the outstanding houses. It'll be different for everybody. Sometimes there'll be 6 houses on here, some here 2. Depends on how the scores work out. And then we start ordering them in the order to create a DNA code. This is a really interesting thing. You can get a DNA code out of your houses. This is mine. My DNA code is 186123592710104. So like, how there's the INFJ, ENFJ, all that. I developed a system that you have this 12-digit code that's unique, pretty unique. I think it's 479 million possible codes. And if you explore this code, I give you some coaching on how to explore the code that you have. So in order to help you explore the code, I give you a short primer on what the houses actually are, which is this stuff. And then go back to your code and talk about how you can read it. How the 8, the second house in this code is 8. The first one is 1. That means I'm the guy that everybody's watching on YouTube. I'm the guy that got on a stage, for example. 1, it's a very individually kind of a life. The individual themselves is important. Then that's supported by 8. So that means things like astrology, etc., are the things that are supporting or putting me out there. And then that 8 is supported by 6. So like problem solving or hard work or grunge or effort is supporting the 8, which is supporting the 1. And this is how you read the code. And the numbers are bigger or smaller depending on how prominent the houses are. So that's a really new system for reading a chart. That's really works good. I may also, probably if I do the video, hopefully I'll do more videos about the thing, but the way life works is you get passionate into doing something else and you forget about the other thing that you did. But when I do more videos about this, hopefully I'll share with you like all the charts that I used to fine-tune the calculations. A lot of them are celebrity charts. Some of them are some of the people that here from our group. It's interesting to see how this all works out for them too. So yeah, I'll show you more on other days. But here, I'll just quickly scroll through so you can see what each house gives you, all the subtopics on each house. Over here on the right, the individual components that are involved in a subtopic that go into calculating it. That's all in there. And then the subtopics get dealt with separately so you can get an overview of them. Here, the subtopics are taken out of the context of their house. This is the way it looks for me. And then the complete list of all the scores. And then this appendix, which shows you all the calculations that are involved in case you want to, if you're just curious or in case you want to try to develop these skills yourself. This is all the calculations that are involved in it. And then the end page. So that report is available currently. Like I said, I worked on this since last December. And now it's June, so that's 6 months of work. And at times I really did not want to keep going, because once you start dealing with 10, 12 charts at a time, that you're, adjusting the scores. Oh, actually, this is important. I should tell you this. I'll read you this bit. Adjusting the scores to try to get them to the peak accuracy, it's so frustrating. Because you change one thing in one place and then 50 things change elsewhere. So that's why it takes 6 months. Let me just, one thing I want to mention before we sign off, what the report is. The calculations at the heart of this report are based very, very closely on principles given in the 14th century Sanskrit astrology text, Phaladipika. So if you're thinking, well, what's this Phaladipika all about? It's about planets and blah, blah. You're just in chapter 2. This whole stuff, all of the foundation of this report is from, I think it's chapter 13, maybe 15, from Phaladipika. I just mined out all the rules from that chapter and then translated them into computer code that could work with charts that were in computer language already. And bam, this is what you get. So that's how cool this book, Phaladipika, is. The calculations at the heart of this report are based, at the heart of the report is Phaladipika. When I do this, the subtopics of a house, I wasn't guided by Phaladipika there. I'm just going on my own testing and knowledge of the houses that combine with the other houses. But the base calculations are all Phaladipika. There you go. So it's really cool stuff. So you can go victicara.com and then click on readings. Here, I'll show you. If I put this, yes, look at that. victicara.com. This is my site on a small version. You click over here, readings. Click that one. Then you get this complete chart report, or this new one, the houses of life. You click that. And there it is. You can order it here. Put in your stuff. It's $54 via PayPal. Boom. Thank you very much. I'll see you in 2 days for some Bhagavatam.